better or for worse?
For better or for worse. Let me quickly check to see if it has gone live, because this is a brand new way I'm setting up.
What's happening?
Well, I pressed start streaming,
Yeah,
and you would think it would start streaming.
you would think based on the queue.
And I when the press refresh. Oh, we're good. We're in.
Oh, good.
It's working. Oh, Lord above, it's working. Hi, everyone. Welcome so much to Maude's Book Club. I love doing interviews with authors. It's one of my favourite things. This is a repeated guest, and I love it when I'm able to check in a couple of years later with another book from an amazing author. And let me tell you, I have just been experiencing several tech issues. It's always when I have an author interview and it needs to work out well. So I'm a little bit late, and in saying that, Maude, we have an echo. Don't you dare. Don't you dare. That's not fun to hear. Yep, there's an echo, and it's the same stream title as yesterday. Look, stream title be damned. That I don't care. You say, all right, I do. This one I can fix quickly. The echo? So Streamlabs kept crashing time and time again. You know what to do. So fuck Streamlabs in the comments. No. Let me try that one. Okay. How's that? Hopefully audio's a little bit better. Yeah, Streamlabs is okay. That's perfect. Fantastic. Now, let me quickly check this one. All right. We're just going to do it like this. I'd love to welcome my guest, who's been so patient with me this entire time. Victoria, V.E Schwab, so many books, so many press tours. You've been everywhere. You've taken a beat just to chill out. And are you chilling? How are you enjoying your time?
Chill. Well, I am somebody who has to be drag kicking and streaming into a break. So I think that I'm 2 weeks into a 3-week kicking and screaming break, but I am doing my best to actually fill my creative well so that I can get back to work next week.
Yeah. Okay. So what are you doing? Let's talk about this year so far. When did you have locked book for Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil?
Oh, January. But I started press touring last fall. So like I have been press touring for Bones, meaning like behind the scenes, influencers, trade reviews, authors, like media circuiting in batches since like last September.
Hold on. So you were promoting a book that you actually technically hadn't finished?
Well, I hadn't finished editing it, but I had finished writing it, and my drafts it was pretty far along. Like I knew what happened. I was just like in the last round of edits. But I would say that like I've been doing this for almost a year for a book that came out 6 weeks ago.
Okay. Fantastic to hear that one. Are you absolutely sick to death of it at this stage?
No, remarkably. I mean, I think it helps that it's like a standalone novel, but not a standalone world. So like I had to say goodbye to a few characters, but I didn't have to say goodbye to like the circumstances or the setting for myself. But I mean, I mostly am just very, very aware that I essentially have 2 books out a year for the next like 3 years, and I'm very behind.
Who makes that deadline?
I definitely am partially responsible. It's like not at the point where everyone else is saying it on me, but it's like in order for me to do this thing that I like to do where I piss off everyone by working on like multiple things. So like if you're a Shades of Magic, Threads of Power fan, you're like, where's that book? And if you're a Vicious fan, you're like, where's that book? The answer is next year. Victorious is like next fall. So that's written at least. But like I'm letting down someone in every quadrant.
You can't please everyone. That's going to be a very, very difficult thing because you do have so many. You're stoking the fire from multiple angles. That's going to be the new phrase that I have. Okay, my camera is jittering as well. So let's just pretend it's from excitement. And that's why it's freaking out this way.
Amazing.
You first wrote Vicious in 2003.
2013.
13.
I'm old, man, but I'm not that old.
2013. And there's going to be about 5-6 years between each installation of that one.
There was 5 years between Vicious and Vengeful, and then there was like 8 years between Vengeful and Victorious. But Victorious is the end. So like it was essentially 13 years from beginning of the series to the end of the series. But I was, in my defense, Vicious is the 4th book that I published. Vengeful is like 17th, 16th, and then Victorious is the 27th. So, like, it's not like I didn't do anything during that period. It's just like I would write Vicious, and then I would write Shades of Magic, and then I would write Addie, and then I would write, another and another. So I have multiple. I, don't have a cohesive audience, which is an unusual thing for an author. Most of the time, I feel like Sanderson fans are Sanderson fans, and they're like, it's all in the Cosmere, and, Brett Pierce's fans are Pierce Sanderson's, and it's all Red Rising, right? But, I have 25 books that probably have 8 different fandoms across them. So I kind of am always juggling what I want to do and my attentiveness to a readership.
My goodness. So we've got Parade of Laughter who's chatting up a storm in here saying, I didn't realize it was so many. You're not letting us down at all. I am here for everything.
Thank you.
So there's that as well. Goodnight Moon says, does the 2 book a year for 3 years include this year, or does that one start next year?
No, it starts next year. Okay. I only had 1 book out this year, and it was Bury Our Bones, and that one has it took enough out of me. But for the next, I think, 3 years, the goal is 2 a year.
Oh my goodness. How are
They're
you?
not all written.
How are you with switching brains between these properties, being cool, now we're in a Vicious mindset, now we're in, or a Victorious mindset, now we're going to be in a Darker Shades Magic. How do you flit successfully?
I don't flit. That's kind of the reason. The thing that kills my pacing is that I can only actively write one thing at a time. I can brainstorm everything. I like to call it a 6-burner stove, but there's one stove that I'm cooking with on high heat, and every other stove is just low heat simmering. But I can only write one world and one voice at a time, or else they risk blurring. And so I will work on one novel at a time, which is why I'm not very fast. I just basically am almost always writing.
I want to talk about your analogy where you often and in many ways compare writing a book to food or a meal using ingredients. Why? Why is this?
I think that I think so much of what writing is amorphous and hard to quantify. So I will often try and find a metaphor that anyone can wrap their head around. Most people don't know what it feels like to hold multiple novels or multiple worlds in their mind, or to build something from scratch creatively. But most people have made a meal.
Yep.
So it's and also it helps because people say where do you get your ideas from? And they think of an idea as the whole meal, but an idea is an ingredient in the meal. So I mostly just use metaphors to take anything amorphous and make it concrete in ways that can become universally understood, because every writer's creative process is completely different. So no 2 writers can talk about how they write the same way. So I'm looking for a metaphor that you and I can both hold in our head simultaneously.
Got it. Which is very, very effective. But every single time I hear you talking about books, I get hungry. That's one thing.
I know.
Yeah.
Me
Yeah.
too.
And it's when you consume a book, it must leave a taste in your mouth. And something that I've seen you say a lot, I love all your analogies. I'm starting to collect them myself. The ending is the most important part of the book. So it's the taste left in your mouth at the end. It's the final bite. It's the purpose. It's funny because my endings, I guess, are really contentious, which is not a thing I've ever really considered. But what people should know is I have to stand by them kind of 10 toes down, because for me, every one of my books, I knew the ending before I wrote the book. For me, the endings are everything that I'm working towards. So for me, they're the whole point of cooking the meal in the first place. Yeah. When you say contentious, because last time we spoke, there was never sort of a focus on the ending of the book. What kind of feedback have you been receiving from Bury Our Bones? Oh, I mean, it's kind of very similar to the feedback from Addie LaRue, which is either you love the ending and think it's exactly how it had to be, or it makes you chuck the book across the wall. Yeah. I think what it is most of the time my books don't end where the reader wants them to, but they end where I need them to.
So like Barrier Bones, to keep it completely spoiler free, ends where I think a lot of people would assume the book would start. This is like, most of my books are in some way actually an origin story of what you thought they were. So like the Vicious is essentially a villain origin story for Victor and Eli. Shades of Magic is an origin story for everyone in Threads of Power. Barrier Bones is an Alice origin story.
Yeah.
So it's like the origin of a villain. So a lot of people think they like don't want the ending to be where it is, but I basically have like, it's like you were invited to a party and then my ending is where you have to leave. Like, it's like usually people don't want to leave at that moment. Like,
and you're like, you're done. Yeah.
And I'm like, sorry, the party's going to keep going, but you can't be here.
Put your knife and fork down.
Exactly.
The meal's done.
Exactly. Put the drink on the bar and leave, please.
Yeah. You've signed the check.
Come back again? You can come back again tomorrow night and do the same thing.
But we have a closing time and you must leave. I like that. For those that saying my camera is flickering, I'm aware of that. And we've just decided that this is my excitement, that it cannot be channeled here. One thing that's really amazing about Maude's Book Club is that there is a lot of community and interaction. And I kind of provide access of what the readers really want to know from authors. So I've got a bunch of questions about Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil that I'd like to go through with you. And then I want to have a big chat about a lot of the things in here as well. Cheyenne's got a couple of great questions. She says, what is the biggest lesson that you want someone to take away after reading this book?
Oh, I think that you're entitled to what you want as well as what you need.
That's fun.
I think especially as women or as queer women or as anyone who's like femme presenting, there's this presumption of like, we're barely supposed to get what we need. And then like, God forbid we have something we want as well that is inessential but important to us. Like it's seen as reaching beyond ourselves to want things that we don't need. And I think the thing about hunger, which is the central theme of this book, is like, it's okay to be hungry. Like it's okay to like have desire. It's okay to take control of your life.
And you were saying that writing Sabine was one of the most cathartic experiences for you. Sans the whole psychopathic nature that she indulges in, what is it about Sabine that you were just like, let's go?
I think it's the complete lack of apology. Like Alice is young queer me. Alice does not know who she is or who she wants to be. Charlotte knows who she is and is terrified of not being accepted and loved for it. And Sabine knows who she is and is just completely herself unapologetically. And I think that that is one of the most intoxicating concepts, is to like be yourself entirely and to not like be yourself in spite of fear or be yourself but like with caveats, but just like know exactly who you are, light and shadow and all between.
I actually have this is something that I've recognized a lot about life. I remember at a particular age, I had really, really great news. I got my first job in television. I was 19 years old. And I just remember feeling none of that bullshit mattered anymore. Like it seeped away and I never cared about sort of like anyone's perspective of me ever again. And it was the most freeing feeling. And I feel like it's a superpower. I remember talking to friends about it. And I said, when did this happen for you? And they kind of looked at me and they said, babe, that doesn't happen to everyone. So what was the moment for you when that happened? Was it a catalyst or was it just a shift in a belief?
I think for me, it was a fatigue, which is to say like this book is in so many ways a reckoning of my own relationship to publishing over the last 15 years. And like the success of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue was really empowering in that way. But what it was coming up at the same time as was a deep fatigue with my own, like, making myself smaller to fit into publishing. Like, I came into adult fantasy as a young woman, not a very welcomed demographic. And I immediately tried to make my gender less obvious, right? I went by my initials. I tried to play it down. I was like, don't worry, you'll not even notice. And then I came out as gay. And then I was like, don't worry, you'll not even notice. I kept trying to like kind of like compartmentalize myself to make the fewest number of ripples possible. And at the cost of my own energy and my own creativity. And the reason that for 20-something books, I marginalized myself. I never wrote myself as the main characters because society had said, like, you don't get to have those things, right? Like, like we relish male anti-heroes, but the moment you make a woman an anti-hero, like Lila Bard gets more hate mail for me than any other character I've ever written.
Wild.
She behaves exactly like a young self-absorbed man. I just swapped her pronouns. And so I think like I basically did my enemy's work for them for 12 years of just trying to make myself smaller and more palatable. And then that fatigue met with the success of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. And my publisher basically said, whatever you write, we'll publish it. And I realized like, oh, well, then they have this promise of support that was earned by royalties and a decade of success for them. I needed to transmute that into boldness and into authenticity. And that's where you get Bury Our Bones from, which is not a book that I think would have been an easier sell earlier in my career. But I had the benefit of the audience to support the ambition.
I will say the beautiful 3 simplified sell of this book being toxic lesbian vampires, and me seeing the feedback and having this reaction as well, being like, sign me up. Yeah. What was that like, having sort of permission, not only from your publisher, but from yourself to be able to explore this, and then having that actually work?
I mean, here's the thing. It's great. And I want to be real transparent that like that book doesn't have as easy a road to success as some of its contemporaries or The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Like I saw immediate like negation online from whole swaths of readers being like, ew, lesbians, or like, no thanks, auto pass, immediate skip. And then like we had these, just so people think, I think sometimes we live in like really progressive bubbles and we don't realize, but like a great example is the tote bags that came out for Bones, say toxic lesbian vampire on them. And the UK immediately took them, stocked them in independent bookstores, and the US couldn't because the concern was that too many independent bookstores would be targeted for hate crimes.
Whoa.
So, like, we can like live in a bubble wherein it's all good and we're like post, sexuality studies. But the fact is like this book is already, it's an unapologetic enough book that it's not like the gentlest version of the story. It's not for straight people who want to give themselves a pat on the back for reading something queer, right? Like it's not the thing that is going to be like, it's that clean bill because it doesn't offend anyone. I did an interview with a guy a few days ago and he was like, wow, you really like painted older straight white men in such a harsh light.
What?
I was like, because men in the book are not they're treated as prey. They're treated as prey because that's what women feel like every day of their lives. And so I made women the predators and I let men be prey. And he was like, had never really seen that for himself before. And he didn't like it. It wasn't very comfortable. And I was like, it's not meant to be comfortable for you. It's not comfortable for anyone. So this is all to say like the support from the champions has been extraordinary. I wish it still had as easy a road, no road in publishing is easy, but I wish that it had the same odds as I wish I didn't have to be at the absolute top of my career to get the level of support for this book that I do. And like, I'm grateful that I'm there. I'm grateful that I'm publishing that at book 25, but like this book just doesn't have a paved road the way some other books do. And I'm very aware of that. And I made the choice to do it.
Good on you. And we loved it. And I will say I would say our Maude's Book Club is split roughly 50-50, maybe more. Yeah. We did not get that feedback at all that they felt threatened or it was precious. And I also want to take a second to just show off our T-shirts.
Yes. Let them smooch. And I think mine just has lesbian in like big kind of master of the universe.
That's it. And I've got the tote.
Crop top too. No, the support, but to take it back to a positive note, like the support is extraordinary, and the support means even more. That's the thing. Is like I had so much fear that the book wouldn't even do well because of that kind of pushback, and the fact is, it just made the champions fight twice as hard. But it's one of the reasons that we had like 9 months of prepping the market, 9 months of being like, hey, I guarantee you I can convince you to like fantasy if you don't think you like fantasy. I can convince you to like this if you don't like this. Like I feel like an ambassador for fantasy with a lowercase f.
Right. It's so funny because I did see a major network sort of morning television show interview you, and they kind of like had an offside about, usually fantasy I would be like, absolutely not. But this was really, and you just kind of like, how, even though we have come so far, there's still such an archaic view, whether it is genre, whether it is takes on sexuality, like you're right, it will always exist.
I think it's amazing because the people who'll be like, oh, I don't like fantasy will also love either Star Wars or something, which is clearly space fantasy,
100%.
not science fiction so much as terms of like most of us wouldn't enjoy reading science fiction. And like, it's like Severance. I'm like, these are fantastical. These are all fantasy. Look around you. The vast majority, like everything Stephen King writes is fantasy. It might also be horror. It might also be suspense. But one of, I think that the ambassador hat that I'll also put on is the idea that like, I'm going to spend my life convincing everyone that like categories are additive instead of reductive, which is like, you should have more than one.
I like that. How would you describe then Bury Our Bones? Because they were, it ramps up with the horror element in like let's say the third act there, which I loved. Don't like horror. I don't like horror. That kind of like ramped up tension where like I was reading faster. Really well done. Fantastic. But I want to hear it from you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I put it as like at the center of horror, romance, fantasy, and literary, which is like, because I think that it's not any one of those four by itself, but I think it is a combination of ingredients, to use the metaphor. But I think it's also thematic. The reason it's horror and romance is that like, one, vampires represent the like intersection of horror and romance. They're dangerous as much as they're desirable. But I think this is a book specifically about like moving through the world in a femme body and like being queer, specifically being queer and female at different points in history. I don't think you can do that without horror because it is
scary,
terrible.
Yeah,
it's scary, and it's terrible. And like the greatest superpower I gave these women is making them a vampire and essentially stripping them of the fear of moving through the world as prey.
And I remember you and I talking about that when I met you in person.
Yeah,
fantastic. Where you were just like, I love the fact that like, the empowerment that women will feel when they're finally not kind of constantly under that threat of just simply being a woman. I do love the fact that we are talking about vampires though. So Cheyenne said, if you have decided to be changed into, would you be changed into a vampire if given the option?
Of course, automatically, instant. I think I could give up daylight. I'd be okay. I'd find other ways to like, you know, find joy in my life. But yeah, I mean, I think I'd do it for the time alone. I think I'd do it for the teeth. Seems like fun.
Yeah.
You know, I already have the wardrobe.
We're missing. So one thing that I loved having the discussion of is like every author has their own iteration of vampirism. Yeah. Like there is sort of like a generalized rule and you can pick and choose and alter and shift. And one of my questions in this one, because like big same, if I would want to be a vampire like tomorrow, was there enough cost?
I mean, here's the thing. I think the big cost. So the hardship in this book is realizing that you're perpetually hungry, but you can't actually sate it, and realizing that it's almost impossible to starve. So when you realize that it's almost impossible to starve, and yet you want to feed every moment of the day, it suddenly becomes about your comfort over other people's lives. Yeah. And I think it's really hard to be a vampire in my books without becoming a villain, because that's a real mental paradox, some mental gymnastics to have to do. I think the cost is the cost with any immortality deal, which is that like the humans in your life die.
Yeah.
Like you
loss
everyone. And loss is so part and parcel. Loss and loneliness are kind of the two driving dangers of being a vampire in most stories. I think the other thing is knowing that you will eventually lose yourself, because my vampires rot on the inside. They essentially go through a kind of spiritual dementia over time. So would you want to live forever knowing that the version of you that lives forever won't always be you, and that you will eventually be reduced to essentially animal instinct?
I'm glad you mentioned rot. Stephanie has a question here going, can you comment on the vampire rot described in the book? Is it psychological only or physical as well? Can a vampire prevent or stop this rot, or is it inevitable?
That's a great question. It's psychological or existential, if you will. It's not bodily. It's not like it doesn't portray on the outside. What I will say is that the vampires in my book, they lose their humanity, but the rate of that loss is entirely dependent on the person. So based on their attachment to humanity. So it happens in the book over days for one character. It happens over decades for one character. It happens over centuries for one character. And one character in the book, Ezra, has not happened to yet. Also Matteo in the book, it had not happened to at that point in the story. So we know, but is absolutely inevitable for all of them.
Got it.
So it's just a matter of time. And I think that sometimes the absence of that happening can be as terrifying as the presence of it happening, because you're just waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yeah. And that's sort of like the driving force with Lottie to not want to change others.
Exactly. And of course, the irony is that Lottie is changing in front of us as she is saying that.
What was really interesting with Lottie was her point of view. We had a discussion about her being a reliable narrator, where she's telling Alice her chain of events and her story. And I actually commended, in a way, Lottie for not completely victimizing herself in the relationship she had with Sabine. What was the decision about sort of shifting it from Sabine telling, like, us living vicariously as Sabine, instead into Lottie sharing her story herself as the character?
So it's a little bit of sleight of hand that you have to be wary of as the reader, because essentially I passed the narrative baton from Sabine to Charlotte as they meet, right? Before they meet, right after Sabine has seen Charlotte and before Charlotte has met Sabine. And so part of that was that I wanted you to be aligned with Charlotte so that you're falling in love with the version of Sabine that she's falling in love with, like, which is a measure of distance. So what's actually happening is that the distance between the reader and Sabine is growing over the book as we step away from her perspective, so that by the time Alice meets her, she's mythic. Yeah. She's like a story of a person. And the other reason is that we leave Sabine at the moment in the story when her humanity is beginning to crumble, and essentially she's going from transparent to opaque. Now, the thing you have to be wary of as the reader is Charlotte or Lottie's perspective seems, by virtue of the fact she is not purely victimizing herself, seems to be an honest accounting. But I would argue that Lottie's own humanity does not survive the entirety of her perspective, and she's just less self-aware about it. And so you have to be careful at which point, like, you know, she's the broken-hearted lover, and so at what point is she starting to polish the stone of her own story? And also just remembering that it's perspectival. This is a lot of ways a love letter to Anne Rice and Interview with the Vampire, and the whole conceit is, like, you read Interview with the Vampire and you get Louis's version of their love story. And then you pick up the Vampire Lestat and you get a completely different version of the love story. And it's the idea that, like, in any couple, there's two versions of the truth.
Mm-hmm. We actually did have that conversation about Lottie's kind of slide and when that happened and how that happened. A lot of our readers loved Alice, especially knowing that should shit go down and we wake up one day and find ourselves dead, it was really interesting to kind of, in a modern day take, discover being a vampire on your own, and that isolation.
That was hard.
Yeah? Why?
It was hard because I try to keep my work timeless while being really grounded in specific time periods, and it would have felt deeply inauthentic if Alice had like no idea what a vampire was. Like, Alice lived through Twilight.
Yep.
Alice lived through True Blood. Alice was like, she's a teenager in the 2010s, so she would have had exposure through pop culture and through narrative. So I felt like it would have been extremely disingenuous to not have her be aware. But also, if she's aware, you do get this kind of ridiculousness of like being like, I'm real and that is a television show, but what is happening to me? And I just tried to walk through it as organically as possible about like, what would I do? How would I try and like rationalize what was happening to me? Because Sabine and Charlotte don't have pop culture when it happens to them. They predate that. So they're like truly in the dark. These are real monsters, whereas this is something that Alice has grown up with in media.
On that note of no pop culture in that era, so my mum was a guest on our Bury Our Bones, and I got mum to read it, and she's an English tutor. She had big comparisons around the time of Charlotte in that era with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Yes.
How much of an impact and influence was on there? Because Mum was basically saying that Charlotte was likely reading about Frankenstein with Mary Shelley's version whilst she was also a monster, and having this relationship of coming to terms with, oh my gosh, I too am a monster.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Is like Charlotte is so averse to seeing herself as a monster. And to be fair, it's one of the main reasons I don't use the word vampire. The word vampire is used one time in the book, but that's not a word they would ever use for themselves. It's used only once. And it's never something that they call themselves.
What? I did not notice. If you said how many times, I would have been like, oh, over 42 maybe.
Yeah, that's why they call themselves roses. They think of themselves as plants in the garden. They think of themselves as organic, as part of nature. And I think part of that was because I was writing about queer characters almost exclusively. I didn't want to do anything that made them seem unnatural or inorganic to the world. And then I just thought, well, of course they would want to have a more positive version of that for themselves. And I think that's probably playing a part in Charlotte's association of it, of difference between what she is and what she's reading about in these kinds of narratives, which is that like Charlotte doesn't see herself as a monster. And Charlotte would see Sabine as a monster, but then she would have to see the love of her life as a monster. Yeah. So Charlotte's doing the most mental gymnastics of the story to stay very deeply human in her mind, even if it's kind of performatively human by virtue of being like, what is a soul and where do we go and what do we take and all of these things. It's, I think, her way of desperately trying to create narrative for it that is not monstrous.
That's mind-blowing in that sense. I've got more questions here. Cheyenne says, who's your favorite character besides Sabine, Lottie, or Alice?
Oh, yeah. Alessandro. So the true love story at the heart of the book is a love story in Venice between Matteo, who's like 500 years old, and the mortal love of his life, Alessandro. And it is the only consenting relationship in the book. The only relationship built out of pure consent and also out of pure love, because as much as Matteo wants to keep Alessandro in his life, Alessandro does not want to be made a vampire. Mm-hmm. And Matteo loves him enough to respect it. And even if that means losing the love of his life, this is something Sabine cannot wrap her head around. But at the same time, they're modeling such a pure love that it's what Sabine goes hunting for when she finds Charlotte. And I think it's important to think of like Sabine goes hunting for love. That's not healthy to start with, but it is like, to me, they are the picture of love at the center of the book, which they're not. It's not a trauma bond. It's like they are love incarnate.
It was one of my favorite parts of the book as well. And the fact that Matteo had such a chance for Sabine to be a role model, to be a mentor, and she just almost like just cannot fathom it, can't understand it, looks at it, not in disgust, but in just like a misunderstanding almost. She
takes what she wants from different relationships. She learns something from each pairing that she's with. She essentially she's manifesting her own self out of all of these pieces.
Mm-hmm. I did wonder though, like there was a chance when Matteo, when we left him, he was moving to America. And then of course the story moves to America. Was a Matteo cameo in the second half of the book an option at one stage?
I'd say not in this book.
What does that mean?
But I think you could draw some, I think there are more attachments in the book than I think are obvious. So like, I would say that it's a pretty straight line from Matteo to another minor character in the book. So
I'm going to need you to bop me over the head with this one.
I would say that Matteo and Ezra's story is probably part of its own narrative that is very like one leading to the next.
Are we ever going to see that?
I don't know. There's plenty of things growing in the garden. I would say so. Addie LaRue and Bury Our Bones are set in the same world, which is to say our world, but with magic. So hypothetically, any character from The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue could encounter any character in Bury Our Bones. And if I were to build more standalone novels in this world, one, they would always be able to stand alone, and two, they might start to intertwine a little bit.
The Quilla is here going, I'm sorry, what? You genius. And then Nick said, we actually did...
I want each one to stand alone. There is an Addie LaRue cameo.
Yes. Is it Jess, freckles like stars across her cheeks? She takes a sip.
I think that's a fair assumption. Okay. I think that's a fair. Obviously, Jess is definitely one of the names that Addie goes by in Addie LaRue. And also, for anyone wondering, because the thing that people always ask is like, but how does Charlotte remember her? Is there some like great caveat? No, Addie went to sleep first. It's like very simple. Sometimes the simplest answer really is the accurate answer there, which is just Charlotte stayed awake after Addie fell asleep.
I didn't get there by myself. Thank you. There you go. I did get that clue though. In fact, we use Fable to do chapter breakdowns with the community, and like that obviously happened quite early on, and we all just lit up about it.
He even put it in twice just in case you didn't catch it the first time. The diary entry is there twice.
Does this mean, since it is the same universe, that Addie was roaming around centuries with vampires amongst her?
Absolutely. It means that in this garden that we have, we've got old gods like Luke. We've got, souls like Addie. We've got vampires like the women at the center of this book. But we know via Ezra's coffee shop in this book that there are other things, right? There's a medium working at the bar. There's a psychic trying to pass college exams. Like, I think it's about like the subtlety of magic. I want you to believe that you could walk into Ezra's coffee shop or that you could pass Addie in the street.
But would those older gods see vampires as a threat because there's a fight between immortality?
I would say on the hierarchy, like somebody asked me, they were like, could somebody make Addie a vampire? And it's like, no, because she's not alive. Like, you have to go from alive to dead and back again, right? Addie's soul already is in a bargain. I would say that I would like to figure out what it is an old god like Luke is afraid of, but it's definitely not vampires. Like Luke is, he's as old as the stars, right? He's like an original entity. And vampires, we haven't found their origin yet. It probably has something to do with the poem, but like they're not that old.
Hold up. Hold up. There is a poem, and that piece of literature, or maybe it's a scroll. This is my fantasy brain going nuts here. And that unleashed vampirism as a disease, as a curse.
I don't know. I mean, what I'll say is that everyone in the book knows the poem, but nobody in the book wrote the poem. And it predates even Matteo, who I think is the oldest vampire that we meet in that book. So
okay.
There's things happening off stage, I would say, that like, the Barrier Bones is an on-stage piece.
You can. My brain's whirring. Vaden here has a question. What challenges did you have in figuring out how vampires should live in a very different time period and in areas of the world? So how was it navigating, the different centuries, different eras?
I love rule building. I think rule building is a thing that allows us to play against. So like for me, boundaries are one of the healthiest creative mechanisms we can have, because then once we make a rule, we can bounce against it. It's one of the same reasons I don't really love things without a cost. So I was never as into like Superman as I was into like the Flash, because the Flash could only run for so long before he burned up all the calories in his body, right? There was a blowback there. Whereas like as long as you kept kryptonite away from Superman,
unstoppable.
Yeah, so I like cost. And so when I'm building my rules, I kind of take it down to its existential studs. And so I knew I wanted to keep the mortality of the heart as a seat of weakness. That's a pretty good universal. But then I tried to extend it and say, okay, well, what's the metaphorical heart? Then what's the existential heart? And that's where we get humanity. That's where we get the fact that like when they feed on other people, their heart begins to beat again. And for that moment, they have what feels like life again, so that we understand what exactly it is they're hungering for. I didn't really get the immolation in daylight principle. I wanted it to weaken them, but I also wanted them to have an option of choosing their own discomfort to like mesh with society, because I thought that would help them pass over time. To be able to like say they can go in daylight is just not fun. It's like it requires discipline and discomfort, and considering they spend most of their eternity working toward their own comfort, it seemed like a good balance. And then I essentially stress test my rules in different contexts. So I'll take a character like Matteo in Venice, and then I'll take a character like Alice in modern day Boston, and I'll start saying like, okay, well, how did their rules work in these contexts, and then start probing for like cracks or something. I'm like, oh, well, that doesn't line up really well. And so one of the things I came up with was that like, yes, I like the idea that you can't enter a house or a place of residence without permission. That's a classic one. But I wanted to be able to flip it on its head and say, but a vampire can also lay claim to space by virtue of dedication to it. Because again, writing about queer characters, the last thing I wanted to do was have them not be able to define home. And so I wanted to make space an essence of possession, but it's an essence of possession that only applies to other monsters. So like they can't lay claim to a space and keep a human out. They can lay claim to a space and like keep a monster out. So things like that. And I basically just stress test it. I build all of my book before I write it. So I build all of my characters before I write it. And so I've usually, by the time I sit down to write the novel, I know how it all works.
Who they are, how they would interact, what the consequences would be, what the ripple effects would be.
And I know what all the scenes are, so I can test the rules out in each context. And that way, if I have a leak somewhere in the boat, I find the leak before I build the boat.
Okay. Then Tay has a question about how you sort of figured out your version of the vampire. With so many vampire stories out there, what were your inspirations and thoughts to make Bury Our Bones stand out from the rest?
Well, I mean, I think it's such a balance, isn't it? Because you want it to stand out, but you also want to be in conversation with and pay homage to. And so, like, I'm definitely in conversation with everything from Carmilla to Interview with the Vampire. I grew up watching Buffy. I devoured True Blood. I probably watched the film version of Interview with a Vampire 20 times before I watched the TV show.
What do you think of the TV show?
Oh, it's phenomenal. Are you kidding me? It's one of the best things to ever be made. Like, it is down to the cinematography, because I've now rewatched both seasons, and like the use of lighting on that show, the use of like Louis' schizophrenia in that show, and like concepts of mental health and domestic abuse within queer community. Like, it's all, I could write like whole theses about that show. But I'm also just like inspired by vibes. So A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, and Only Lovers Left Alive, and Sinners, like all of these things. I want to be in conversation with them. And then the places where I'm trying to stand out are really in the centering of the narrative. So, like, for instance, I really wanted to write lesbian villainy, and I really wanted to write complicated, messy queer relationships, because so often it feels like we have to be on a pedestal in fiction. And what that says is that when we force our characters like ourselves onto a pedestal, it means that we are saying that queer characters, and by extension, queer humans, aren't deserving of the same degree of nuance and complexity as their straight counterparts. And so, like, for me, the ways in which I wanted to stand out was less about the lore, though I have little pieces of the lore that I've added to that I'm really proud of. But it's less about the lore and more about the identity of, like, so much of this book is the concept of, if you look at Louis and Lestat's tumultuous, epic, multi-century love affair, what about the collateral damage? What about all the people whose lives they ruined along the way and didn't even think about afterward?
I've got so many questions that pop into my head when you talk. It's like those beautiful books where every sentence you're like, oh wow, that's like another book in itself. You talk it's great. You talk about immortality a lot in your books. Addie LaRue, you explore immortality with hope, and in Bury Our Bones you teamed up immortality with hunger, and you wanted that sort of parallel, that flip side, that shadow to Addie LaRue's immortality. Do you think, and this is something that we've talked a lot about with sort of Greek gods, like Luke as well. The older you get, immortality, do you think there is a correlation between the age you become and how bored you get and how meaningless human lives become? And is that what's success? Let's go.
I have a such strong feeling about this because I actually don't believe in the concept of immortal ennui.
Okay.
Because, like, the reason Addie is so deeply, passionately, existentially optimistic is because it doesn't actually hold water any other way. Because when you have immortal ennui, it's suggesting that there's literally no out button for that immortal, but I've yet to read a work of fiction or watch a work of fiction wherein there was truly no way out. Like, a vampire can fall on their own stake and they can walk into the sun. So if you're 300 years old and you're bored to shit and you don't want to be alive anymore, yet you haven't walked into the sun, then now I have a belief problem. Because you're either suicidal or you're not, right? And so, like, for Addie, I realized that the only way, considering all she has to do is raise her hand and say, Luke, I don't want to do it anymore, the question becomes, why doesn't she? And so I actually had to give her radical existential optimism to explain why she was still in the game. And that's also because she was dealing with radical loneliness, because she couldn't matter to anyone else. And so with the dynamic of my vampires, it's slightly different, because the question is less about loneliness and more about love, meaning, like, what happens when the love of your life lives forever? Because, like, relationships end. We want them to end beautifully by one of us or both of us dying, right? We want to be together until the end. But what happens when there is no end and we just, like, evolve as people? Eventually, are we not going to be in the same place? Because, like, Charlotte is in love with a version of Sabine that doesn't exist anymore, but she can't let go of it because she just keeps hoping she's going to, like, catch sight of it like light in the water. And so my concept of, like, I think you have to be hungry for something. And so my vampires, if they live long enough, become embodiments of hunger and nothing else. But at least hunger is a drive. It's still the opposite of apathy. So I don't believe in immortal apathy and immortal ennui to the degree of like not wanting to exist anymore, because I've yet to meet an immortal, Luke probably aside, who could like physically cease to exist. And Luke has no desire to cease to exist, so it's fine.
I love that you've really thought about this as well. This is great.
I'm so passionate about this because I think it's total bullshit when we just look at immortals and they're like, oh, I hate being immortal. I'm like, then get off the boat.
Yeah, you
like,
don't got to do it. Yeah.
Like, you can get out.
But a lot of the time that entertainment will be in the destruction of others for a source of entertainment. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I think that their caring of humanity goes down, but their caring in general doesn't. I think they value human lives less or more, but never equally. But I think just they may not value human life if they're no longer human, but I bet they value sensation. I bet they value, it's like an addict needing a greater high to reach the same sense of awareness with themselves. But I don't equate that with like apathy. I think it's more hierarchic. Like if you start to see people as food and you don't live among them, then you're probably not going to value them the way you would value your other immortal lover.
Got it. Occult Stool has a great, that's his username, has a great question about this as well. Vampirism seems to be very much true to the Harvey Dent quote, "You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain." How long would Alice take to lose her humanity, and will she allow herself to live that long?
That is a really great question, and kind of one of the concepts of this book is, do you still think she's not a villain? Because like, I would argue her body count in 48 hours is greater than Sabine's was. Like, she is not she's like, we're aligned with her to be the protagonist, but I would argue that Alice is not the kind of humanity that's going to last 200 years. I would think she would be very lucky for it to last too.
Alice didn't have a guide. She didn't have an instruction manual.
Honestly, if Alice has Ezra as a guide, she might be okay. But Alice has just probably forfeited that by virtue of how this book ends. And like, the fact is that like Sabine and the widow, it's not transparent, but it's still consenting, right? Like there's still a promise, a sense of what you're getting into. Sabine gives Charlotte a sense of what she's getting into. Nobody gave Alice a choice. And so I think she is truly born of violence in almost a way that's more akin to like Dexter, which is right, born in blood. This concept of like, she has like been baptized in violence. Like she's already starting out from a place of grief and loss. She's already does not have a sense of self. And now in the course of 48 hours has created such a radical reinvention of self that I don't think Alice is on a great path, except for that Harvey Dent quote. I think that, I think she and Ezra really exist as like polar opposites, which is Ezra is somebody holding on to his humanity for all that it's worth. Like he's so determined not to lose it and is really like ascetic about that almost. He is very, very rule bound to like make sure that he doesn't do anything which he feels would harm his relationship to humanity. I kind of think Alice checked that one out pretty quickly.
You're so right, though. But if you've turned and you are lost and angry and confused and
I don't blame her.
More powerful.
Yeah, that's the thing. From the moment Alice entraps that guy who might have meant her ill in the car and has the realization that she never actually has to be afraid again, I think Alice talks about this in one of her flashbacks. Alice is so angry. And her anger has gone real cold. Her anger is something she's bottled up so hard for like the majority of her young adult life that I think that this was her empowerment toward anger. Like vampirism in this book is a kind of mechanism of agency. It's a mechanism of liberation. It liberates each of the three women into a new version of themselves.
For better or worse.
But I think I think it's really interesting when people finish the book and they think that Alice is the hero. As I would argue, this is an Alice villain origin story.
We actually had that. Yeah, this is where her story truly starts. It wasn't.
That's my thing about people thinking that this is going to be a whole book about Alice learning to be a vampire, and I'm like, no. This is an origin story for how Alice becomes what she's going to be now.
We're talking about.
I would say probably haven't seen the last of Alice.
Great, love that as well. Okay. James J. Buntrock says, you've said before that you were lightly possessed by the characters that you write. Which character was
Really holding me accountable.
which character was the most fun to be possessed by, and which character gave you the most trouble?
Charlie gave me the most trouble because she's the least like me. So, like, I am like, Victor Vale was the first kind of autobiographical voice I ever wrote. I don't mean that, like, because he was a serial killer as well. I just mean, like, a kind of psychic distance, less emotive psychic distance, very practical. And Sabine is similar. And so Sabine was the easiest and most cathartic to write because she has the least amount of internal conflict. She has the least amount of internal dialogue and exposition. She's very to the point. She wants it. It's like that Ariana Grande song, right? Like, I see it, I want it, like, I got it. As I butcher lyrics here.
I want it, I got it. There you go.
Exactly. And so she was the most fun to write. And also, people should understand that I wrote this book character by character in order. Meaning, I wrote all of Sabine from the moment we meet her to the moment we leave her, and then all of Charlotte from the moment we meet her to the moment we leave her, and lastly, all of Alice, so that I would have each perspective before I rolled over to the next one. So I spent the most time with Sabine, and she was first. So she was my intro, and she's my anchor, and she was the most fun. Alice was also really fun because of the ADHD, and like the structure of her narrative is like really distracted. And it's like on it, parenthetical, back. And it's funny because my editor and I both have ADHD and like just slightly different flavors. And so writing that and kind of getting her feedback and passing it back and forth, trying to find the balance was fun. Charlotte is the most introspective and the most empathetic and the most emotional, all of things which I in my natural state am not. So hers was the least comfortable to write.
What's your flavor of ADHD?
Hyper focus, which is the exact opposite of my editor, who's like definitely parenthetical. I'm the person who brings it back to the original starting point because I never left there. I'm like locked in on my starting point.
That's nice. I'm tangent queen. It's like, that's an interesting point, but let's go all the way around here before we come back to the point. Which is always fun in interviews. I do have somewhat of like a structure. Good luck. But I do have another question.
As long as you know it. As long as you know it. I think I have to write everything down in like 17 different places before I know it. But between those 17 places, I've got it.
I also like writing things down because it's the storm and then it's the calm, I find.
If I ever reference any of the notes that I wrote down, no.
Oh, I've got a page.
I lose them immediately.
A page of things that I didn't get to because I had other questions pop up. We had a discussion in our book club about James and Jocelyn that perhaps James utilized this situation to maybe cover his own sexuality. Vaden asked, did James and Jocelyn have a lavender marriage?
That's such a good question. I mean, I didn't write it that way, but I think you could read it that way. I mean, I was so focused on Charlotte, I kind of always assumed that James was straight only because he thought he would do a better job covering for Charlotte if he wasn't. I think James is the reason Charlotte gets sent away to be kind of like taught how to perform heterosexuality. And I think that like, I didn't sense in that speech that he gives her where he is like, I'm a man and you're a woman and there's different rules here. I didn't sense, sympathy so much as empathy. So like I got the sense he understood that he was lucky and he was privileged, and yet that there was a societal difference. So I'm actually not going to give James that credit, but if you want to read that, I'm a big fan, like hearing all the characters, but I think he would have done a better job covering for her. I always kind of wanted the sense to come across that James is the reason she gets sent away. Like he obviously sidebarred with the parents, and I don't think he would have done that if he was like fully self-aware and on her side.
He was almost like the gentler reminder of the patriarchy.
Exactly. Like he's loving and he's caring and he is like, he does care deeply about Charlotte, but he is still reinforcing that patriarchy. He's still holding the line of it.
Nick in the comments says, I read James as just an empathetic brother. He knew what was going on with Charlotte and Jocelyn, but knew the reality and tried to help them how he could. I don't think that he was malicious towards Charlotte. His heart was in the right place. Got it.
110% agree with, like, that was my intention, obviously. I love it when readers read other things in. But yeah, for him, I felt like he thought he was doing the kindest version of reinforcing the norms to protect her, like by hurting her now, protect her later. But yeah, I don't think he was looking out for her in the same like sees like way.
Another male character that we've talked about who I adore, Matteo. Tay wants to know, what do you imagine Matteo, or how do you imagine Matteo spent his time, and what was he doing after he departed the narrative?
Oh, I can't tell you that. I might want to tell you that later.
Are you working on a part 2 here? Is this?
No, not actively. Not actively. But I also reserve the right to not talk about characters' timelines outside the purview of this book, just in case.
So you've established this world. It feels like it's become your playground. Will you continue playing in it?
I love that you're like, let me just phrase the exact same question in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
Your TV training is on display. What I'll say is that, like, I had a really long conversation with my agent because for the majority of my career, I have jumped around and I have never sat and played in one playground. And I think less out of a sense that I didn't want to and more out of a sense that I couldn't, because if I was continually reinventing, then nobody could stop publishing me, right? Like I could always create a new door, and that served me for so long. But when I finished Bones, I will say it was like the first time in a very long time that I was like, oh, but I like this playground.
Okay.
But I right now I'm editing Victorious and I'm working on Threads of Power. So.
She's like, Maude, I have 2 hands that can type one thing. Got it.
One book at a time.
Okay.
But I will say that I'm always the first thing I wrote down on a paper after I turned in the last version of Bones was what else grows in the garden.
Okay. Oh, a garden analogy. In a garden can grow ingredients. Just saying.
I know. Also, you just start wondering, you're like, what's the equivalent of a strangling vine? What seeps all the nutrients out of the soil and what feeds it back? And what is, the rose afraid of?
Oh. Okay, more wearing. How many books would you say you read a year? Because you were saying, obviously, to create, you must consume.
Somewhere between 120 and 140.
Calm down. Got it. How many have you read so far?
83.
Fucking, it's July.
But here's the thing. One, again, just always have to be doing something. 2, I see it as part of my job. I see it as a huge part of my job. I'm a little bit militant about this, but if a writer comes to me and I'm like, hey, what have you been reading? And they're like, oh, I don't have time to read. And then I'm like, but you have time to write. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, but if you only have time to read or to write and you're a writer, you should be reading.
Yeah.
Because I think I can tell, because of how much I read, I can tell when a writer doesn't read. One, I can tell when a writer only reads the genre that they write. 2, it's a derivative. It's here's the only way I can think to describe it is as a fantasy author, I do not get ideas. I do not get ingredients from other fantasy novels. I get ingredients from memoir, nonfiction, poetry, history, article, film. It's everywhere. And I think you have to not only dedicate time, if you're a writer, to reading, but you have to dedicate time to reading outside of the purview of what you create. So I always challenge writers for every time you pick up a book that you're really excited about and sure you're going to love, also pick up a book that you have major doubts about. That is what a library card is for. Most libraries have 10 slots or something for books. If you don't want to spend money on things that might be terrible fits for you, use the library app for that. But the vast majority of my ideas and ingredients have come from reading things completely disparate from what I read or what I write.
Love that. I can't believe you can tell from writing.
Oh, I can always tell. It's very obvious.
That's wild.
It's very obvious because it's like a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. You can tell when the pool of ink that they're using, the ink pad that they're using is going dry because it's just the thing. And you can tell that their only points of reference are other works within their same field. And it's like, you have to find a way to reinvigorate. You need to find a new source of ink.
Out of all the books you've read, have you got some standouts? Do you want to shout out?
This year?
Yeah.
Yeah. This year, Stephen Graham Jones, The Buffalo Hunter was exquisite. This year, I also really love The Favorites by Lane Fargo, which essentially was like a Wuthering Heights retelling in the competitive ice skating community, ice dancing community.
Yep.
One of my favorite books was an essay series called Rejection by Tim Kulamete. I can never remember how to pronounce the last name. It is, as a millennial, so cringe. Like, every one of the essays in it, it's a fiction essay collection. Every one of the fiction pieces is about like secondhand embarrassment as a millennial. And it's like truly 5 stars for me, but I never want to read it again kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, and I listened to like the Dungeon Crawler Carl books. I finally run out of those. And so I'm very annoyed that I now have to wait like a normal person.
That's a new achievement for you.
No, I really hate waiting. I'm used to like finding something and then just getting to like binge all of it. Those are some standalone.
There was a new achievement joke in there. Hold on, this might help. Wait.
I got it. New achievement.
Yeah, there we go.
I mean, I'm in it for Princess Donut.
So good. And I know you've got a cat, and I know you're very pro being a cat owner, and I'm getting there myself. I want to quickly, because I've only got about 2 minutes left with you. Having multiple point of views and characters in your book meant that we, the listeners of the book, got to delight in the fact that your narrators really brought this book to life. How did you have a role in that? And gold star, well done for that.
Thank you. I cast them.
Yeah, so good.
So as like, of the say 100, let's give me 125 books a year. Of the 125 books a year, I listen to 80 probably. So I'm a huge audiobook listener. I'm a runner and I love to listen to audiobooks when I run. Like, I'm just always a body in motion. So for me, I know the power of an audiobook narrator. And I also knew when I was writing this book that I wanted to have 3 separate narrators for the 3 women. And so I cleared it essentially with Macmillan, with Tor, before I wrote it, because I was like, I need to know. It's going to affect this. I want you to know. And then I went to Julia Whelan, who did Addie LaRue, and I had coffee with her. And I was like, Julia, I need you to be Sabine. Like, I know it's not like a one-hander because you're going to share it with 2 other women, but like, will you be the hardest to narrate character in this book? Because she does such an incredible job with Addie, and she said yes. And then Marissa Keelan, who was in my Threads of Power books as Tess, as my lead in that. And then obviously Katie Lung from Arcane. And I was like, it was my dream cast.
Yeah, you crushed it with that. And I love that you're also listening to audio books, especially I feel as an ADHDer, I get to do 2 things at once. I get to do 2 things.
What you can't see behind me at this house in France is that I have a 1,500-piece puzzle, and my joy is to put on an audiobook and work on a puzzle. If my hands are busy, my ears are busy, my eyes are busy, it's perfect.
I can't believe I'm out nerding you here. Mine is walking around my neighborhood with my dog playing Pokemon Go, listening to audiobooks.
I feel like that's an alternate perfection.
Yeah. Yeah. And
alternate perfection.
That is somehow our time. I feel like that went so fast. And
it was a joy.
Again, apologies for flittering cameras and tech issues, and I'm not even using my proper streaming platform, but we got through it, and I'm very proud of us. Victoria, for those that want to follow your works and your social medias, because you are active on there, where can people find you, and how would you like to direct traffic?
Yes, I'm really only on Instagram. That's just my poison of choice. So I'm V.E Schwab on there, but I also run a monthly free newsletter. It's everything from craft advice to life updates to whatever I'm loving that month. And you can sign up at linktree.eschwab.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thanks for spending the morning, even though it's evening for you, with me talking about books. And if you keep writing them, I'll keep getting you on the show if that's okay.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Mon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.